Be your best self. This might be the first self-help book to actually explain what that means. I
Oh,
haven't read every self-help book, obviously, but I've read some of the popular ones, and they all say things like, be your highest self, be your best self, which sounds really nice as a quote out of context, but what does that actually mean? And I define it quite clearly in this book as aligning as much as humanly possible with your core values and enacting them in the world through your actions, becoming the embodiment of the principle of who you are in a heroic way. That's what being your best self means.
becoming the principle of who you are. You don't mean like just becoming a one-dimensional archetype, do you?
Well, would that be so bad? As long as it's the right archetype?
Becoming just that, not having a personality outside of that.
There are a couple ways to approach that question. You're familiar with the concept of a paragon, right? In fiction, in narratives.
Yeah, someone who upholds the highest standard of something, or perhaps more generally than something.
It's essentially a character who is at the end of their developmental journey. They've already gone through all the
Ah,
heroic trials to prove who they are, like discover who they are and slay the dragon and return home, having transformed as a result of the adventures they went on. And this
weird to
character,
consider oneself at the end feels a bit limiting. Like, oh,
um,
I have no further improvements to
right.
make.
So yeah, it's a
Ta-da!
bit misleading because the hero's journey is actually cyclical. It never ends. You just keep going on more and more heroic journeys, but each one is like at a higher level of elevation because you learn more and you transform more, and the home you return to is never the same. But usually in from the perspective of the hero on the journey in the narrative, this person usually takes on like a mentoring figure, like Gandalf or Obi-Wan Kenobi or Dumbledore or Yoda. Star Wars gives us two good examples of both Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Um, where of
Could
course,
have had Qui-Gon, but
yes,
that wouldn't have worked for setting up four to
yeah, Qui-Gon is like the paragon
6, yeah.
who was cut down before he was able to play the role of the paragon, which is kind of the whole point of his character, I think. To make you think how differently would this story of Star Wars have worked out if Qui-Gon hadn't died. For spoilery reasons we could get into for people who haven't seen Star Wars, but um
Dun 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 dun
I do
dun.
talk about
For
Star
those who
Wars
have seen it,
in this book. In fact, I open with a quote from George Lucas.
you talk
Um,
about Star Wars in a
yeah,
book
what a
about
strange, right? Me talking
terrorism.
about
No
Star
way.
Wars? That never
The
happens,
fuck, man.
right? Um, actually, I do have a running gag in every book I've written so far where I have to talk about both Star Wars and cats. I don't know how that
Nice.
started, but in
How
every
do you fit cats into this one? That's
um
that's they're
did I
independent.
mention
They
cats in this? I
are
must have mentioned
independent.
cats. I don't remember where I mentioned cats in this one, but I believe in all six of the books I've written, and now the seventh
Ah,
one I'm working on, the one about romance, I have already mentioned Star Wars and cats. So I begin in the section called Mentorship in the Medium of Mythology with a quote from George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. The real audience for all stories and all myths is the kids who are coming of age. We enjoy the stories as adults, but really, storytelling is about imparting the wisdom of the previous generation onto the children who are becoming adults and giving them a context for how to behave and how to learn the lessons of the past without making the mistakes on their own. George Lucas. And
base.
the reason I included that is because it's quite clear if you learn anything about Mr. Lucas, his stories, Star Wars, is a heavily mythological story across six movies and two generations. And it's very obvious that it's not that way by accident. I think some movies, some stories are kind of accidentally really deep.
He did intend 9, right? It's just they apparently butchered
Yeah, he
the
changed
last 3,
his
which I
plan a
haven't
lot.
watched.
Yeah.
A
Um,
nonology.
but a lot of stories that are really good, it's almost like just serendipitous that they ended up being so good and with like this really complex framework of mythological development. But with Star Wars, it's very clearly that it was meticulously put together in such a way
All
that
right. I thought
every
you were saying
character
that
and
about
every
Star Wars
action.
for a sec,
No, no,
that
no,
it
no,
was
no, no.
serendipity. Yeah, I was tripping
In
there.
fact, Star Wars is the first movie I can ever remember watching back in the early 90s, and I've been watching it my whole life since then. And I still notice new things about it. Like when I
Hmm.
introduce someone else to it and I watch it with them, I notice, oh, like that's subtly hinting at, foreshadowing things that are going to happen if once you know the whole story in all 6 of the movies. Because of course we don't acknowledge the Disney movies as Star Wars movies. There's only 6. Mythology, any kind of mythologically significant art, is that which reminds us of deep principal truths about who we are and how reality works. Things that are so deep you might miss them when they show up in ordinary life. And that's why you need a concentration of them in the form of fiction or some other artwork that makes you stop and reflect, whoa, this is such a powerful, emotional, artistic experience. It reminds me of something deep and true about my life. It's like the artist is intentionally selecting just particular representations of reality, particular types of emotional, intellectual experiences that they find most meaningful, right? And art that is either too realistic or too fake, as in it has nothing to do with reality, doesn't really have that same kind of effect. And if it's too realistic, then it just feels like real life, right? It's kind of mundane. It's just like, oh, here's a scene from real life. Okay,
It's
what
not
was the point of that?
dealing deeply enough with the abstractions. It's too
Exactly. You
concrete.
can't concentrate reality if you don't abstract it a bit. But you can't abstract randomly, chaotically, uh, which is like I guess would be like a postmodern approach to art. Like just strange for the sake of being strange, defying category conventions just for the sake of defying category conventions. Not that there can't
That's a
be
bit
some
of a
value
tongue
in that.
twister.
You can still have a meaningful experience from that. It just won't be of the type I'm talking about. If you love abstract postmodern art, that's fine, right? It's just a fundamentally different type of art. I mention a few of what I consider the most mythologically significant movies of my childhood in here, one of which, of course, is Star Wars, which, is not exactly unique. Many people consider that one of the most influential movies of their childhood. I mentioned The Lion King. I mentioned
Yeah.
Superman, and I mentioned as an offshoot of that
Iron Giant.
the Iron Giant because the Iron Giant is a mythological movie inspired first by the mythology of Superman. Because if you know the story of the Iron
I
Giant,
still haven't seen it, but
it's quite
spoiled a
good.
bit, I
It's the
think.
kind of movie
Sad.
that deserves a modern remake if they could capture the same essence of the story just with modern visuals and special effects.
Nice.
But it's the story of a giant alien robot having to decide what kind of person he wants to be, and he's inspired by the figure of Superman to be a good person. So Superman has to pre-exist the Iron
Hmm.
Giant. It's a mythological figure.
You should pitch the remake idea to someone, but
I'll do
not
that.
just say, hey, do a remake. Do like, you have your ideas and you could not just shot for shot, obviously. So you could tell them
I would even
how
be
you think
happy
it
with
should
a
change.
shot-for-shot remake of it just with modern visuals. I think that would be a worthwhile cinematic experience. So the point of opening the book that way is to show that even like things that maybe you never considered deep or meaningful, just like mundane movies that everyone knows, if you really think about them, like you can find some hidden layers of depth in them, and you can reflect on how does this apply to me as a heroic and exceptional being making my way through the universe, trying to discover who I am and what's most important to me, so I can therefore become the best possible embodiment of who I am and the values that define me, the best version of me.
Yes,
Yes. It's full of language like that that would cause you to salute. you know.
Rom-coms. Does that work for rom-coms? And weird
Uh,
stuff, weird ones like 50 First Dates, if you know that one. The
50 First
woman with the
Dates wasn't
memory
bad.
loss.
Yeah,
That's
that
a
was.
bit
I
trippy.
haven't seen it in a long time.
Makes me really depressed
Yeah, I'd have to watch it again, but I
just
do
thinking
believe
about it.
there are hints of depth in that particular movie. I wouldn't say so in the average prototypical rom-com. Those mostly just seem to be about
The
like,
Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston, possibly in the same movie ones.
yeah, there have been a few of those, haven't there? I don't know. I don't keep up with that.
What? Possibly with the exact two of them in the same movie. I don't know if I kind of feel like there has to be at least three of those.
But there
Oh,
it's
Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston is one of them. I might be getting confused because Ben Stiller and Adam Sandler kind of look a
right.
bit
So
similar.
the question you have to ask when watching these, potentially shallow and superficial movies is this meant to make me reflect more deeply on who I am and how life reality works, or is it meant to just distract me for 2 hours?
Ah, and even in those, there's probably something worthwhile, not just
Well,
distracting.
I mean, if you're
It's almost like you'd have to strongly go out of your way to have nothing to avoid there being something worthwhile in there because it ties to abstractions from reality.
well, yeah, so
And
you know the phrase death of the author, right?
yeah, people like to do that with J.K.
Yeah.
Rowling, the
So,
cucky
so the
people.
idea is whether or not the author intended something to be in it, your mind can still piece together and arrange things to find some kind of meaning that was not intended to be,
Right.
right? Which I think is a valid way to approach any kind of art, but also the intention of the author does matter from a different perspective, like what I was just saying about George Lucas. It's very clear how intentionally he crafted almost
Yeah.
every little detail about the 6 Star Wars movies.
But
And it's
also, the author doesn't have to consciously intend something for them to put it in there because of how part of their mind is working on some subconscious level. So they generate the idea because of some subconscious idea. So they put something in because of something
Mhm.
going on in their mind that they're not aware of. So it's intentional in that sense. It's going by some metaphysical value, some deep premise about the world and their place in it that they hold, but they don't know that they've done that because they aren't fully awakened as to um, what values they hold. So
Yeah.
then intention is there, even if they go, I didn't intend that. It's like, you did.
Yeah, because if someone else had made it, it wouldn't have been there, right? Every painting is a self-portrait and every book is an autobiography, right? Yeah, anything you create, you're kind of either consciously or unconsciously projecting your metaphysical values through the choices you make, through the editing process, through the creation process. So why did I write this book? It's to kind of like help people assess their own developmental journey through this metaphysical lens, this archetypal journey of conquering challenges that prevent you from embodying who you are to the furthest possible extent. So some of the chapter titles are things like goodness and motivation, naivety and idealism, insight and
That's a cute
innovation.
title.
Thank you. Emotion and conviction, faculties and strengths, challenges and trial, ability and practice, responsibility and judgment, arrogance and elevation. That's a good one. The final chapter, ideals and spread, which obviously indicates that the whole
Spread,
point of,
interesting.
yes, like spreading your values and your influence through your actions. That's the whole point
Ah, got
this
it.
whole thing is building up to, right?
I like adaptation and flow, damage and integration. Is that like kind of like disintegration and integration, but damage being a preferable word?
Yeah, that one is about integrating the difficult, painful things that happen to you. Because anytime you are stressed to a breaking point,
Anti-fragility. Boom.
yes, sure. Anytime you are stressed to a breaking point, You have a choice to try to block it out and push it as far away as possible. But if you do so, you are inhibiting your ability to embody your own values, or you can go as deeply as possible into it, which means integrating it into who you are. So I'll give you an example of that, actually, a recent example from my own life. This is kind of a spoiler for not the next book I will write, but the next book, book number 7.
Damn,
This was book
planning that
number
far ahead.
4. Book number 7 is almost done. It's in beta reading now. You've seen parts of it, the book on sex and romance from a masculine perspective, which will probably be called Romantic Idealism. The next book after
Yes.
that, though, book number 8, is going to be on suicidal ideation, which I've been planning for a while.
Suicidation title, boom.
Suicidation, maybe. I was thinking of the working title Courage to Live for reasons I'll get into.
Oh, yes, done.
Um,
Do
it's it's kind of a play off of the idea of the heroic sacrifice, like having enough courage to die for something you believe in.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So if you have to be courageous to die for something that's an embodiment of your values, like the heroic sacrifice, right? Does that same logic not also extend to having enough courage to continue to live for something you believe in when living itself is so difficult? Because the presupposition, of course, is that living is good and dying is bad, and therefore to choose to die, it has to be really important to you. Something has to be important enough for you to choose to die, because that's like the worst thing that could happen to you, right? But what if it's the opposite?
I
What if
think my
dying would be?
standard is if no positive value is left to be possible to me, so I can no longer live as a human being,
How would you know
only
with 100%
negative.
certainty that there would be no possible positive value left?
Wouldn't. So probably just wouldn't kill myself unless like I'm terminally ill and in excruciating pain that like I'm 99% sure positive value can't make up for.
Mhm. That's one of the things I address in the book, by the way, like that kind of thought process of trying to calculate whether life is worth continuing to live, right? So if you're of a particular persuasion for whatever reason that life itself is difficult and a chore and unbearable and always will be, then the choice to consciously live for something you believe in is equivalent to a normal person's choice to consciously die for something they believe in, the ultimate sacrifice.
Those
And
damn normies.
yeah. Do you have enough courage to make that sacrifice, enough courage to choose to live? Hence the title Courage to Live, which may change before publication, but that was the thought process behind that. On the subject of damage and integration, right? I have been highly suicidal for at least 10 years. I'm trying to remember exactly when it started. It may have been when I was in China. I'm trying to remember if it was there before that. Um, and
And you think you've cracked some of it recently, don't
yeah,
you?
I'm not suicidal anymore. This was a recent development in my
I
life.
expected it to be like I'm working on it and getting somewhere. Not I'm
No,
not
no.
suicidal anymore. I'm just
Well,
done.
what's interesting is that I've
1
been
to
working
0.
on the suicide book, the suicidation book, for a couple of years now, like
Good
taking notes,
name.
planning it,
Don't call it
drafting
that.
it. Um, so why that's significant is that I did not start writing this book as like a how I solved my suicidal ideation kind of book. Now you can too. Top 10 tips for not wanting to kill yourself. I did
It
not
must have
say
helped by you thinking about it, right? It helped, I'm guessing, that you're writing the book.
I don't think that's what solved it. And
Did
it
it
wasn't
not?
the goal. It wasn't like I'm gonna
Okay.
think my way out of this.
Obviously it wouldn't have been the goal, but it got you your mind working on it on like more
Yeah,
levels than it had been.
certainly it put certain factors in my head to be paying attention to. Maybe that's something
You
that
had
we
to ask
explore
more
addressing
deeply
in the book
why
itself.
than you ever had, right?
Yeah,
Why?
maybe. Yeah,
Why
like
the
what
suicidal
would
ideation?
make a life
Why
worth
live?
living for someone like me? That's the question that you have to ask when you go far enough down this road. Okay, I know that I hate my life. I know that it's not worthwhile. So what would a worthwhile life look like for someone like me, right?
Did
What
you
would make
hate
me
your
live?
life?
Um,
Or did you not hate it but still found yourself suicidal?
okay, so the idea is that it has nothing to do with momentary superficial pleasures or happiness as we think of it in the typical sense, right? Because I know I've lived a very easy life. I know that I am more comfortable, more successful. I've had more experiences than 99% of people ever will. I'm incredibly privileged, to use a
Mostly
term.
good, some bad, like most of your time in China.
Right.
Fuck China.
Most of the human race lives in objectively, worse material conditions than me, right? So like it's not at all like, oh, my life sucks so much, right? It's that because of the kind of person I am, I have a standard of meaning and purpose in my life that is so high and so goddamn impossible to approach and fulfill. And it seemed utterly unrealistic that I would ever be able to acquire that which I needed to feel like my life had sustainable meaning and therefore would be worth living. Right? That's the premise of the book. That's who the book is for. People who think and feel that way.
I
And
think people who think to begin with are more prone in this kind of world to suicidation. Because once you think, you see
yeah,
the catastrophic problems in the world and how they affect you and what little you can do to begin with, at
yes.
least.
You become exponentially more aware, or you have the
Weltschmerz.
capacity to be aware of suffering, problems, unbearable situations that most people just ignore, right? If you're a simple-minded person, then your capacity for suffering is limited to just whatever you are paying attention to,
Hmm.
right? You can't abstractify, right? You can't extrapolate beyond the immediate circumstances of your own life. You can't see like the whole system of the world and identify with the process of trying to improve it and be hurt and
Weltschmerz,
saddened by its problem.
literally world pain. The depression you feel when the world as it is doesn't reflect what you think it should be.
Yes, idealism, which is my favorite
It's
movement.
like the other side of the coin of idealism in a non ideal world.
Yes.
You're an idealist in a non ideal world. Welcome to Weltschmerz.
Yeah. So depending on how strong of an idealist you are, you're setting yourself up for enormous disappointment and suffering when you realize the more you consciously study how fucked up
Amazing.
the world is, how broken the world is. I view the world like a machine, like a series of systems that just simply don't work. And it hurts that they don't work. Me. It hurts me. So then you have to ask the question, what after
Both abstractly and at times concretely when it
yes,
actually comes into play in your life. But
sure.
even when it doesn't, you
Right.
still feel it.
Even
It's
though
like,
my
no, these things just should not be happening. That is
right.
not a reasonable thing in any kind of world.
Even if my immediate momentary experience is fine, like there are no pressing problems in my life causing me pain or stress, I still cannot escape the knowledge that the world is the way it is, and I cannot be okay with the world the way it is, right? So, how can someone like me feel this so deeply for more than 10 years and then suddenly it's gone? And I'm pretty sure it's permanently gone. I think I knew that as soon as it was gone. Like it seems like it's resolved. It's gone.
Was
Never
it
coming
in the
back.
morning shortly after waking up?
Um,
Were you thinking, like specifically thinking, or did something just happen to click based on previous times you've been thinking or whatever?
it was something that happened to someone I love.
Something good?
No, something very, very bad. That's the damage part of the damage and integration category.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
How
Um,
did that do it for you? That
well,
seems very counterintuitive.
because it gave me a reason to stay alive. It gave me the meaning that was previously lacking from my conception of continuing my own existence, which is what I was talking about as the premise of the book, right? Some people need a lot of meaning to make a heroic sacrifice to die, and people like me are the opposite. We need a lot of meaning to make a heroic sacrifice to stay alive, to feel like being alive serves a purpose, no
If you
matter
can
how
call it a
unbearable it is.
sacrifice, I mean, the choice means you get to, live.
Yeah, but if life is unbearable, then the alternative might be preferable. So what happened was I watched someone I deeply cared about, someone I acted as sort of a mentor and older sibling, maybe even parental to a degree kind of relationship to. Someone who I believed in very strongly, who I got to know over the course of a couple years, and I saw so much potential and strength in. I saw her very quickly become a victim of fear and insecurity and cultural conditioning that polluted and corrupted her character in a very, very ugly and depressing way.
Do I know who this is?
No, I don't think so.
Got it.
And I've seen things like this happen to many people I've known over the years, right? I just refer to it as turning to the dark side to invoke Star Wars again. That's a very good way to describe it, and that's pretty clearly what George Lucas meant. If by turning to the dark side, we mean somebody surrendering to their negative emotions and suppressing their consciousness and their ability to willfully pursue their authentic values and embody who they are, all those things that we've already talked about, right? Um, to see someone's,
Basically, they do the opposite of everything you say
yes,
in this book.
they become
The
the opposite of their
exceptional
values.
minority,
Yes.
the heroic and exceptional
And
minority.
it's always because they've surrendered to some kind of negative emotion, which can be fear, which leads to anger, which leads to hate, which leads to suffering, right? Uh,
That's pretty good an impression.
thank you. Um, it could be any kind of insecurity, right? It doesn't have to be like rage. I hate everyone. I'm gonna fucking kill you all. It could just be I'm afraid. I don't know. I don't feel safe. I don't feel you scare me because you're different than what I'm used to, right? Any kind of insecurity.
Sounds like you're describing almost all Armenians.
Yeah, but this isn't specifically about Armenians. They just provide a very I mentioned before in one of our previous interviews that the dominant emotion in Armenia is shame. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
what suppresses the majority of Armenians from fully being who they are. They feel ashamed constantly.
I tend to assume for less developed countries it's fear.
Yeah, shame feels like an offshoot of fear, like an internally
Fear of
focused kind of
shame.
fear.
Fear of shame, like you dread feeling shame, sort of thing. Like you can't bear, you try
Yeah,
to
it's
do
it's
whatever
it's
you can
almost
to
like
avoid
guilt,
feeling it.
right? It's like I've done something wrong and I'm afraid that other people will know I've done something wrong, right? That's kind of the essence of shame. I've never really been a very shameful kind of guy. think I'm kind of immune to it.
Same, woo.
Yeah, like I just don't really care very much what other people think of me. Although I can feel guilt by my own internal standard when I know that I have failed to be the kind of person I should have been, to act as strongly as I should have. But that's not the same thing as thinking, fearing what other people will think of me, right? For me, if I make
Weakest
a
to the
mistake,
strongest.
but it's not a mistake I reasonably could have avoided, I don't feel any shame or guilt or remorse or anything, right? Like, as I know I did the best I
A
could
is A.
circumstances, right? But if it's something you realize, oh no, I had enough perspective and experience at that time that I could have and should have made a better choice. That's when I feel real guilt about my actions. That doesn't happen very often. I think I know why this particular situation with this particular um, young woman affected me so heavily, even though I've seen this kind of thing happen to lots of people. I've lost lots of good friendships and relationships because of people turning to the dark side, becoming embodiment of their fear and
Mm,
insecurity. And it's because I felt a sense of responsibility for this person because of the
right.
role I took on in her life, that I was supposed to be a pillar of support to help defend her against this sort of thing happening to her. The only real support she had in her life, frankly.
Were you? She had free will, presumably still has,
Well,
so it's not just you.
right. But you don't have free will so long as you are being suppressed by your insecurities and your fear and your negative biases and your cultural pressures. You
You
can't
still
think
do. It's
appropriately.
just
You can't
harder.
self-reflect.
It
Self-reflection
more
is
becomes on you
necessary.
to use free will to notice and get out of being fully gripped by that.
Right, but there has to be a base level of security that you feel in order to be able to self-reflect and have that free will, that conscious self-awareness to say, wait, this is wrong. I need to make a better choice. Imagine your survival mechanisms ramped up to 11, every alarm in your body flashing and every siren blaring, and you have no idea what the fuck is happening. You just know there's an emergency happening right now and you need to react. It feels like you're dying or under constant threat of dying, right? Under those circumstances, an animal has no free will.
Well, of course, an animal, but another animal, but we're the rational animals. So you can have all
If
those
we have
survival
developed
instincts. It
our
doesn't force it
rationality, if we
switch
have
off.
developed our self-awareness, which is very difficult to do when you're still very young and you've never had any real freedom in your life. You've always been a slave. You and I can sit here in our privileged position saying we've had the opportunity to develop these capacities.
Privilege.
Yes, we're quite
Woo!
privileged. We've developed these capacities for rational self-awareness, but most of the world hasn't, especially young people growing up in highly oppressive conditions.
But
And
it was still on them, their responsibility to do so. They still had a measure of free will to whatever capacity at the start, which
right,
you grow as you
which
use it.
which is the only reason
They
we met and
defaulted.
bonded in the first place, because she made a rational choice. She saw something of value in me. She saw an opportunity in me to grow. And for those first couple of years, that's how it seemed. Like I was really proud of all the progress she was making. I felt very invested in this person, and I truly deeply loved and valued what I saw her becoming. And so to see how quickly that could collapse under just the wrong circumstances
Damn.
was heartbreaking. So I think it's in these kinds of cases, it's never just one thing. It's persistent buildup of stressors, unprocessed negative emotions, traumas that can suddenly result in a catastrophic collapse, a cascade of
Hmm.
explosions within you, which is very clearly what happened in this young woman's case. I knew a lot about her personal life and various traumas she'd endured that I thought she was getting better at dealing with and
Do you
overcoming.
still talk to her?
No, she's excommunicated me for the last several months.
Damn.
Yeah, that was very heartbreaking. It really felt like being a father and like watching your
Are you
teenage
trying to
daughter.
get back to talking to her to see if there's anything you can do
Uh,
to
at this point, I think
rescue her from the belly of the beast?
well, we'll get to that. I think at this point, the smartest thing I can do is just give her space to process what she's going through, because
Right.
anything I try to do now will just be seen as
An
negative.
attack.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the devil no matter what I do while she's in this state of mind, essentially.
Damn. How long had you been helping her?
About 2 years. We were very close for 2 years.
Damn.
Um,
Would you say the primary aspect of your relationship was mentor mentee?
yeah, that wasn't the entirety of it, too. Of course, she was also very helpful to me in a lot of ways, and I really valued her companionship and her friendship. So it wasn't entirely one-sided, but that was the primary dynamic, yeah.
Primary, yeah.
I, of course, recognized, even just because of the age difference between us, I was almost twice her age. Like we could never be equals, but we could still have positive, beneficial influence on each other, right? But the whole realization I had to come to because of this sudden collapse and the loss of something I valued so much was that if I truly love this person and value what I saw in her, what I saw her becoming, what I consider to be her authentic self, then I have to be doing whatever I can to maximize the chance of that person returning, of her recovering from this misstep, this tumble into the dark side. If I am who I say I am and I value what I say I value, and
If you have integrity.
yes, then the chance of this person recovering from the state she is in and returning to embody her value back to the path she was on, I have to be alive for that. Me being alive increases the chance of that happening because there's still a hope I could be a positive influence in her life to help make that happen. And if I'm dead, I can't do that. I can't
Star
tell her
Wars.
that she has no hope without me. That would be very arrogant of me. I don't know what
You
other
can't tell her. You
yeah.
can
No, I don't know
think
what other
it's pretty close to
experiences
zero without you.
this person is going to go on to have in their life with or without me, right? But I
Right.
do know that for the time that we knew each other and were close, I was definitely the strongest, most positive influence in her life, right?
Because you're in Armenia and the other people in her life are Armenians. No offense
Yeah,
to
she
the
lived
actually worthwhile Armenians.
in a cave in a black void here, and I was one of the few sources of light in her life.
Damn.
And so if I die, I can't be that anymore. And although this is all the kind of stuff that
Why do you think it's permanently gone then if it's tied if it came of one person?
because there are other people like her, I haven't
So
met
it
them.
came from her and then expanded
Yes. So in
to the
principle,
general
I
case.
understood these things already. I could have written a chapter in the book describing the kinds of things I'm talking about. But until I experienced it personally with someone I was deeply emotionally invested in, it wasn't real to me. It wasn't a visceral part of my emotional reality. It was just a concept. Concept I may have understood very well and been able to articulate very well, but I didn't experience it until this,
Right.
like a father losing his daughter.
In this case, she's not necessarily lost. Bit of
Right.
different case in that there's still the ability to fight for her or on her behalf.
With a spiritual death, which we might call this, there's a chance of resurrection. There's a chance of
Yeah,
recovery.
a good fun
Theme of
piece of fiction.
resurrection is very, very common in many religious myths and other cultural myths.
Mm,
And of course, they can't actually mean literal physical resurrection from the dead because that's impossible. But a spiritual kind of resurrection, a loss of who you
we
are
believe it's
and
impossible.
recovering it later, that's possible. That
Mm,
happens. And so, if I'm going to play any kind of positive influence in helping her resurrect back into the person she is, I have to be alive for that. And even if it's not her, there could be other people like her
yeah,
that I could help make that happen for. The point about the concept of damage and integration, what I have done there is integrate the lesson from that damage. Instead of sitting and wallowing it and letting it beat me, I learned what I needed to from that, and I became stronger, anti-fragile because of it. And that's one of the hardest things I've ever been through.
that's good then. And does that give you more to put in the book that you actually have something, not just um, the suicidal stuff, but there is a way out of it?
Well,
That kind of feels like it has to go in if
yeah,
you're
that
writing that kind
definitely
of book,
has
right?
to go in the book, probably at the end. But I
Because otherwise
cannot
it's
write,
just
yeah, I can't write the book with the
hopelessness.
claim like, hey, here's how to overcome your suicidal
No, no.
ideation. Because remember, I started writing it not knowing that I was going to overcome it. In fact, I had pretty much accepted that I was just always going to feel this way, but I still
And
felt
there's
I had a
no,
book to write.
you don't have a blueprint for everyone.
Right.
You have, here's what happened with me.
Yeah.
There's probably some kind of generalization for that may be universal or pretty close to universal, but that generalization probably hard to find, to capture, and to actually get to apply to those people's lives. It might require a particular kind of experience like the one you had, which can't be
Well, yeah,
manufactured.
exactly. I could not have planned this or willed it into being. It just had to happen through circumstances. I had to go through the suffering of the whole thing. I could not have made this happen.
I do wonder though if without a person making that experience happen, they can essentially go make themselves go through emotionally and in other ways what you went through to go through hell and keep going on a deep enough level without experiencing it to come out the other side? And or do you think it has to be they find some concrete?
The abstract is understanding the concept of like finding something worth living for, right? The concrete then was this specific person who is my motivation to keep living. But then the abstract
That's the
after that,
original concrete, isn't it?
to abstractify after that is extending it beyond just this specific person, right? To realize that there are other people like her, that there are principles that include more than just her. So that even if this person died tomorrow, like, oh no, my concrete is gone, I guess I have no reason to live now, the abstract principle, the new concept that has superseded the old one would still remain true. That emotional force in my life would still be there, even if she died tomorrow.
So concrete to abstract back to the same concrete from your new abstract perspective to a more general abstract.
Yes,
The concrete being the
an
person
abstract
turning to
now
the
with
dark side.
emotional conviction behind it based on a personal experience.
Yeah.
Now it's like I have a visceral, concrete, emotional reminder of an abstract I already understood very well. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think it's now permanently embedded in me, which is why I think I'm never going to be suicidal again. Because it's no longer just tied to that one person now, that incidental event.
Mm.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah, that may be the general way out of suicidality, that you have to find something in the world that you have to live.
You have to take responsibility for something, and it has to be something you deeply, deeply care about by choice as an expression of your values, not just something random like, oh, I'm gonna grow a flower. I'm gonna get a pet and take care of it. I'm gonna, adopt a child. Why not? I'm taking responsibility for something. No, you have to be deeply, personally, authentically invested in it.
Yeah, I'm sure it can't be a flower.
Well, that's the example given in The Little Prince, right?
Little Prince can fuck off
Or
then.
no, the fox. First it's a flower, then it's a fox. I haven't read it in a while. He meets a fox and he
Is the
tames the
fox
fox.
anthropomorphic in any
Yeah,
way?
the
Can
fox
it
can
talk
talk.
and think?
And he says if you tame me, you'll be like responsible for me and I'll be a part of you, right? And then he has a flower at one point and he says that there are a million flowers just like this flower, but this one is mine because I've taken care of it. I'm
Hmm.
invested in it. It's part of me now. That would be the concept of hope. You still have to be willing to try as long as you're still alive, as long as you still haven't made the choice to kill yourself. You are still living, you're still making choices, you're still taking actions because you believe in the value and the outcome of those actions.
Even if it's just a maybe, that even if you believe most likely nothing will work out, but I'm not fully convinced yet, so I will go on for now,
Well, I haven't killed myself
sort of
yet,
thing.
so I might as well keep trying. That is a mantra I repeated to myself over and over again for 10 years.
Of course,
Haven't killed
not
myself
keep
yet.
trying to kill yourself, keep trying to find something that makes it worth not
Yes.
killing yourself.
As long as I haven't killed myself, I'm still going to do the best that I can. Until that time comes that I do kill myself, that's what I will do. That's what I thought for 10 years. So, everything we've been talking about here is a very dramatic, very personal example of the kind of advice I give in this book, The Heroic and Exceptional Minority. And the
Yeah,
reason
we went very concrete there.
we've gone full circle. Uh, the reason I can give that kind of advice, and
Full
all of you
circle,
got
look
to
on the
finish.
book. Wait,
Hmm?
you planned this. Look on the book.
Oh, the circle. Yes. Here we are. We started here. We went around. We're back here now on that white dot. Um, the reason I can give the kind of advice I do in this book is not just because I've read a lot of self-help books, but because I have lived this over and over again I have confronted these things over and over again. That's how I know
And thought
it
deeply
works.
about your experiences and then about your thoughts, your abstractions.
Yes. Right? So if there's someone else like me in the world, someone who would identify with a book called The Heroic and Exceptional Minority, oh, that's me. He's talking about me. Then you just might know what the fuck I'm talking about. When I describe these kinds of problems, you're probably going to struggle with your entire life and what to do about them. Stuff normal people wouldn't understand in the slightest because it's not part of their reality. If you're the kind of person who loves the idea of personal development and self-help, but finds the vast majority of content out there superficial and shallow and not speaking to you on a level that means something to you, maybe this is a book that will actually finally surpass that standard for you because it was written by someone who felt the same way. And maybe
Who was
this
that? Who was it written by?
me, that was me. And maybe this short example I've given you, this drama from my own life, can convince you of that.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Not that fingers crossed in itself will do anything, but fingers crossed nonetheless, because it's a symbol of that hope.
Yeah.
Do you talk about hope much in this book, The Heroic and Exceptional Minority?
Well, I would say the whole thing is based in hope. And the idea of a superhero represents hope, like the idea that there are guardian angels out there. You know, that's essentially what a superhero is. It's like the guardian angel concept made tangible. That you know, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, in a natural disaster or something, and you're all gonna die, and there's no way out, there's still a chance that Superman is out there somewhere flying around, and he's gonna swoop in at the last moment
The
and save
Doctor
you.
in Pompeii,
The Doctor, right. The Doctor is a superhero for all practical purposes, right? He can do things that we consider impossible. Superman,
even if he can only save one family.
right. There's always that chance that some exceptional being acting heroically will decide to come in and save you at the last moment. That's what hope is, the idea that things can always change for the better.
And sometimes that exceptional being is oneself. So
Yes. Well, if you are an exceptional being, it means that the rules that govern most other people's minds and lives don't necessarily apply the same to you. You can do things that other people can't because you think
that they
differently.
can't yet. They haven't awakened and may never, sadly.
It's irrelevant. What matters is what you can do.
You say irrelevant, but allying yourself with those who can live up to that same level is beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone needs a sense of community and belonging. But even if the
And other
whole
people
world,
who can be responsible in a way, if possible.
right, but even if it were you against the world, would that really change anything?
It makes it harder. And so, if it's not you against the world, then it's better to find those who are, if it's not you against the entire world, if it's you against most of the world, but also there are others who could be with you, then it sure as hell helps to find some of those others.
Yeah,
And if you
that's the
can
ideal.
to help make some of those others,
Even if you were the only person in the world, or even if everyone in the world disagreed with you and is actively opposed to everything you stood for, you would still be who you are, right?
yeah,
Your values would still be your values.
but it's nonetheless worth acknowledging that that's probably not the case. There probably are others,
Yeah.
and they
So,
can help,
yeah.
not with the entirety of what you personally value, but especially with more general, broader, maybe let's say sociological.
What's the logical end of this? Is it just you being content with who you are? No, it's you trying to change things for the better, and that means other people's minds. It can't just be, I'm satisfied with the man I am. I have good morals and I feel good about myself. You have to feel fulfilled doing those things. That's a lifelong process that never ends until you're dead.
Yeah, it's not just being independent, which is a virtue, is good to be independent in numerous ways and in the deepest way of being independent in your mind, in your soul, but also interdependence, finding ways in which you can mutually be dependent on others for greater value, both in terms of productiveness, like material values, and in terms of broader spiritual world values, abstract values in terms of how the world functions, how people function. Question: did you fit everything you wanted into this book, or would you imagine there might one day come an expanded second edition?
No, I think this book is exactly what it was supposed to be. I
Cool.
think there were very definite boundary conditions for this book, and it filled them, and I can't really think of anything I would change about it. That's not
What are
true with most
the
books.
So I guess you can't tie, maybe you probably could actually, one specific single theme, undercurrent message that you put forward.
The main premise of the book would be embracing who you really are and also what makes you different than other people. That's why we keep talking about exceptions, right? Because the whole world typically will try to tell you there's something wrong with you for being different. And this book is all about saying, no, your job is to figure out why you're different and fully embrace that and figure out what strengths that gives you by being different. What can you do that others can't? That's a strong theme throughout the book, right? It's in the title, The Exceptional Minority. So, like, even if you got nothing else but that, if you walked away with that, I'd say that's a pretty valuable lesson to learn from it.
yeah, I think for myself, I'm not sure I ever bought into weird is bad, but I'm not sure until recently I had figured out weird um, in specific ways, not like weird sort of psychopathic sort of ways. Weird is good if it's okay. It was nicer to just say weird is good as a sort of pithy remark, but with there are caveats, obviously, like that it's not bad. Different is good if it's not bad, sort of thing. I just like, oh, I'm different. That's okay. I am what I am. I think it took me a while to realize, oh, my differences are the things to use to best find my place in the world, not to um, act like to sort of have to press against all the time to find my place in the world, but to leverage,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. Maybe I'd have got there sooner if I had fully read it, but
Maybe. It's too bad I didn't write it sooner.